Hi, everybody. It's me again. I'm here with my COVID-19 update after a couple weeks. There's a little bit of good news, maybe some hiccups along the road, and maybe some things to keep track of. Let me share my screen with you. So, for the first time since the Delta surge began, we are seeing global cases decrease, which is wonderful news. Unfortunately, there are still hotspots: Cuba, Iran, Malaysia, even the US, but Australia and Costa Rica are also now rising. There are cases decreasing off of their peak now in the United States and specifically in California. And hospitalizations may also have reached their peak in the US and are decreasing in California, which is great news. As far as vaccination, we have a little bit of a downslide on our vaccination rate, but 67% of Californians are now fully vaccinated, which is wonderful. And mortality is either rising, decreasing, depending on where you are in the country. As far as vaccination goes, when you compare the United States to other first world countries, you can see we continue to slide down this list a bit. We're holding right above 50% of our population, and other countries are sort of overtaking us as far as how well they're doing vaccinating their population. You can see that we do have almost 177 million people fully vaccinated. And now we're going to start tracking how many people have received an additional dose, meaning a booster, and that's 1.44 million since August 13th. You can see that a little over 60% of our population over 12 and 18, and over age 65, we have over 80% vaccinated, which is great. Specifically, as far as how many doses are we administering per day, you can see, unfortunately, there's been a little bit of a dip. So as cases begin to decrease and hospitalizations begin to decrease, perhaps people are not as concerned and not getting vaccinated with as much frequency. Unfortunately, what this means is that this again pushes back our projection. When we were having that uptick in vaccination rate, we had this projection having us at 90% in March of next year, but now because there's this decrease, it's again going out to May before we're going to hit that mark. When you look overall at the country, percents of each state that's fully vaccinated, you can see these stars are areas that there has been a significant increase in the last 2 weeks as far as how much of their population is vaccinated. Unfortunately, these areas that I've circled really have not changed significantly at all over the last month as far as their rate of vaccination. And so some work can be done there. When you look at California, we've stabilized and perhaps dipped a bit. We're right at 95,000 over a 7-day moving average. And this hasn't really changed much over the last 2 weeks. When you look at how much of our population is fully vaccinated compared to the US, California is actually doing a little bit better overall than the rest of the country. However, when you look at our elderly population, there appears to be some issues or hesitancy in the elderly population regarding getting the vaccine versus the elderly population in the rest of the country. Specifically in Santa Clara County, you can see we're actually doing very well over 80% of our entire population, age 16 and older, age 12 and older. And even when you look at the elderly population, at least here in Santa Clara County, we are actually doing as well as the United States, even though California continues to lag. When we start looking at number of cases globally, of course, we have added cases overall in the last 2 weeks. Thankfully, our fatality rate remains low overall, but you can see that rate of new cases per day, there's been an 11% drop over the last 2 weeks. So finally seeing a downturn in this latest surge globally. And when you look at hotspots, you can see similar hotspots to what I showed you 2 weeks ago, but now there are a few increasing countries: Australia, Suriname, Costa Rica, Serbia are new hotspots arising. And when you look at this chart that compares the US to the EU, perhaps we have hit our peak. I think we'll have to continue to watch this graph and make sure it continues a downturn instead of turning back around and moving up again. But when you compare this vast difference between the US and the EU, you can see that they did a much better job at turning around back really as soon as August hit, and we did not. When you look at the countries with rising case rates compared to us, interestingly, you can see Israel has finally been able to turn down their steep rise that they were on for a while. Cuba came down, but now appears to be upticking again. The UK is steadily climbing. We perhaps are coming down, as is France, and then of course India and Chile remain low. When you look at national cases, you can see this nice downturn of this slope again at the end of this graph. However, many states did not report data on Labor Day, and so we'll really have to watch for a few more days to see is this a real downturn or not. When you look at the geographic expansion, not surprisingly, the Southeast remains the most significant area of spread, but certainly Alaska does not look like it's in very good shape, and areas in the West and Northwest are also quite hot on this map. This is a great slide to see for me after 2 weeks ago when most of these states were red, meaning they were on the upswing and they had increasing cases, some much beyond their initial peak last winter. Now you can see the vast majority of these squares are blue, meaning that they are coming down off of their peak, and only a few remain pink or red. South Carolina in particular still swinging upwards, West Virginia, but overall, most people coming down. When you look at California cases, you can see that we really seem to have hit our peak of cases in this surge back on September 1st, and then had a steady decline since that time. When you look at this overall national data, you can see that we may have hit our peak last week. Decreasing off of the peak again in Santa Clara, you can see back on August 25th is when we had our highest number of cases. And also in San Mateo, back on August 25th was the highest number of cases. So really looking like a nice downturn for us here. When you look at Stanford cases, some students have been coming back to campus lately, so there has been a little bit of an uptick. But when you look at that positivity rate over the last 7 days, still only 0.34%, much better than even the surrounding Santa Clara County, which is at a 2% positivity rate. For Stanford faculty, postdocs, and staff, we're still doing quite well, only 4 cases in the last week, and again, a positivity rate that's quite favorable. When you look at variants, it's really all about Delta. That's the only one that remains dominant within the United States. And when you look at proportion of variants by state and you look at California, you can see that Delta is overwhelmingly the one. It's 95% of all cases. There's less than 1% of the Alpha variant left. There's less than 1% of Gamma and these Delta Plus variants, and then a smattering of others that make up that final percentages. The new Mu variant is what has been in the news lately. 2 weeks ago, I was talking to you all about the Lambda variant and what that meant and whether we should be concerned about it. And the story is very much the same for the Mu variant in that it was initially found in Colombia, and it has been seen in the United States and in California for quite some time, actually. It was first seen back in March of this year. And when you consider that it's been here at the same time that the Delta variant has, and it has not been able to outperform the Delta variant has remained dominant, it does not appear, at least right now, that the Mu variant is going to switch from being a variant of interest to a variant of concern, because it does not appear to have the same infectious rate, the same transmissibility as the Delta variant that we're currently dealing with. When you look specifically at Santa Clara County variants, you can see we certainly do have our large amount of Delta variant, smattering of the Delta Plus variants, and then the Santa Clara County website has not changed this Mu variant to put it up into a variant of interest yet, but you can see that we do have 27 cases of that Mu variant here in Santa Clara County, and the 5 Lambda variant cases are actually from previously. There have been no new Lambda cases in the last 2 weeks. Thinking about pediatrics, really, this is important in the last week or so, in that overall, throughout this pandemic, children have made up 14.6% of all cases, but you can see that just in the last week or so, children have represented 26.8% of all weekly reported cases. That is a pretty large increase in the cumulative number of child COVID-19 cases. So certainly something to be aware of, something to be concerned about, something to try to take measures to prevent. Thankfully, the vast majority of children who get this are not hospitalized. Only 0.1 to 1.9% of all child COVID-19 cases result in hospitalization, and an even lower percent, 0.03% or lower, result in death. So although that would be of great concern, the percentage is still quite low. When you look at hospitalizations overall, hopefully we have reached our peak in this surge. We're kind of right at a stabilization level. We'll have to see if that continues to go down or if it picks up again after this latest Labor Day weekend. When you look at the percent of those total hospitalizations that are child hospitalizations, you can see that it's 2.3% over the last week or so. And you can see this steady climb over the last several months where it has been increasing as a percentage of overall hospitalizations in our country. When you look at hospitalizations in California, again, it looks like we have come down off our peak. When you look at the census of overall hospitalization and the ICU census, the largest numbers were seen back at the end of August, and now we seem to be coming down from there. Same in Santa Clara County, we are decreasing our hospitalization and ICU numbers. And same in San Mateo, we are either stabilized to decreasing. There was a little downturn and then a little bit of an uptick. So we'll have to watch that. Thankfully, in San Francisco proper, hospitalizations are finally decreasing as well, decreasing number of ICU beds and total hospital beds. And overall, over the Bay Area, hospitalizations are decreasing with 9 less cases over the last 2 weeks than there were before. Mortality overall nationally, unfortunately, this continues to go up, but maybe stabilizing. Mortality always lags slightly behind cases and hospitalization rates. When you look at this graph, this really shows you that the number of deaths per cases in the US during this surge is really quite far outstripping most other first world countries that we would compare ourselves to. Unfortunately, this likely does have to do with vaccination rate, although some of these other countries do have a high vaccination rate and are still not that far underneath us, such as Israel. So something to look at and be aware of and focus on perhaps as we continue to examine this data. When you look at mortality in California, thankfully, this also seems to be decreasing and coming down off the peak, although we do have incomplete data on mortality over the last several days, especially with Labor Day weekend, and so we'll have to continue to watch this. When you look at national databases, it does appear to be stabilizing, so hopefully that is a sign that it is true. And here in Santa Clara County, we had 23 deaths over the last 2 weeks, but when you look at that graph, you can see that there was a spike 2 weeks ago and then a little bit lower uptick last week. So hopefully this is also coming down overall. And with that, that is all the information I wanted to share with you. I hope that that has been helpful. I hope it helps you make decisions in your day-to-day life about yourself and your family and your friends. And I hope you are all safe in the coming weeks ahead.